The atmospheric processors hummed their eternal lullaby as Nora Ashworth wiped down table 12 for the third time that evening. Outside the viewport windows of Starlight Diner, the swirling nebula of the Andromeda Drift painted space in shades of purple and gold. It was beautiful, but beauty didn't pay the bills or keep the artificial gravity running on Space Station Concordia. "Order up, Nora," called Henrik from the kitchen, his gruff voice cutting through the ambient noise of the late shift. The old cook had been working interspecies establishments since before the Dragon Accords were signed. Back when humans and dragons meeting in the same space usually meant someone was about to die. She grabbed the steaming plates of synthesized protein and genuine Terran vegetables, a luxury that cost extra but was worth every credit for the homesick human colonists. Table 6, a family of asteroid miners, had been waiting patiently while their twin daughters drew pictures on the condensation-covered windows. "Here we go," Nora said cheerfully, setting down their meals. 2 miners' specials and a kid's combo, with extra berries. The younger daughter, maybe 6 years old, looked up with sauce already smeared across her cheek. "Miss Nora, why do dragons have to duck when they come in here?" Her parents exchanged embarrassed glances, but Nora just laughed. "Because they're much taller than us, sweetie. Even when they look like people, they're still built bigger and stronger. But why do they want to look like people? Maybe for the same reason we sometimes wish we could fly like they do. It's nice to see how the other half lives." The little girl seemed satisfied with that answer and returned to demolishing her dinner. Nora made her way back toward the counter, noting that the evening rush was finally winding down. Just 3 more tables occupied, and then she could start closing procedures. That's when the atmospheric alarm chimed, announcing an incoming storm front. Through the viewports, she could see the first wisps of charged particles beginning to dance across Concordia's shields. The station rocked gently as the stabilizers compensated for the electromagnetic interference. The diner's main door slid open with its familiar hiss, bringing with it the scent of ozone and the metallic tong that preceded ion storms. Nora looked up from her cleaning supplies, expecting to see another stranded traveler seeking shelter. Instead, she found herself face to face with the most striking man she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. His hair was dark as space itself, shot through with silver streaks that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch a deep amber that shifted to gold when the diner's lights hit them just right. He wore expensive clothing, the kind of tailored garments that whispered of wealth and power, but there was something vulnerable in the way he held himself. And then Nora saw why. Cradled against his chest was the smallest dragon she'd ever seen. The infant was maybe 2 feet long from snout to tail, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian touched with veins of silver. One wing was folded normally against its tiny body, but the other hung at an awkward angle. The baby dragon's back legs seemed completely still, and Nora's nursing training, incomplete though it was, immediately recognized signs of paralysis. The man-dragon, she corrected herself, recognizing the telltale signs, now that she was looking glanced around the diner with obvious uncertainty. The other patrons had fallen silent, their conversations dying as they took in the scene. Dragons weren't exactly common on Concordia, especially not ones carrying disabled offspring. "Table for 2, the dragon said quietly, his voice carrying a musical quality that spoke of careful breeding and expensive education. Nora grabbed 2 menus and approached them, noting how the dragon instinctively shifted to protect his bundle. As she drew near, "Right this way, sir. I've got a nice booth that should work for you both." She led them to booth 7, one of the larger ones designed to accommodate dragon-human mixed groups. But as the dragon attempted to settle his son on the padded bench, it became clear that the standard seating wasn't going to work. The baby dragon made a soft sound of distress as his father tried to position him comfortably. "Would you like me to grab some cushions?" Nora offered, setting the menus aside. "We've got adjustable supports in the back." The dragon looked up at her with surprise, as if he hadn't expected such consideration from a human. That would be ... helpful. Nora hurried to the supply closet, returning with an assortment of soft cushions and a small gravity-assist pillow designed for exactly this situation. "Here, let me help." She arranged the supports carefully, creating a nest-like environment that would keep the baby dragon stable and comfortable. As she worked, she found herself humming softly an old Earth lullaby her mother used to sing. The baby dragon's large eyes, dark blue like deep ocean water, fixed on her face with startling intelligence. He made a small chirping sound, and his functional wing fluttered slightly. "Well, hello there, beautiful," Nora said gently, finishing the cushion arrangement. "What's your name, little one?" "Ember," the dragon father said quietly. "His name is Ember." "Ember," Nora repeated, smiling, as the baby dragon chirped again. "That's a perfect name for a perfect little dragon. Are you hungry, Ember?" The infant made a more enthusiastic sound, and his father's tense posture relaxed slightly. He hasn't eaten much today. The journey was ... difficult. Nora could hear the exhaustion in the dragon's voice, see it in the way his glamour flickered, slightly around the edges. Maintaining human form took energy, especially when stressed. "What can I get you both?" "We've got fresh protein synthesis running, and Henrik makes a mean baby food blend for the little ones." "I'm not sure he can handle solid food yet," the dragon said hesitantly. "His digestive system is still developing, and with his condition ... "No worries," Nora said confidently. "Henrik's got a daughter about Ember's age. He knows exactly what baby dragons need. Trust me." She disappeared into the kitchen, returning minutes later with a warmed bottle of specially formulated dragon infant nutrition. The liquid was a soft golden color, enriched with the minerals and proteins necessary for healthy scale development. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the bottle. The dragon hesitated, clearly torn between his protective instincts and his son's obvious need for food. Ember settled the matter by reaching his tiny claws toward Nora and making demanding little sounds. "He seems to like you," the father said with wonder in his voice. Nora settled into the booth across from them and carefully lifted Ember, supporting his head and injured wing with practiced ease. "I used to work in pediatric care before. Well, before life got complicated." As she fed Ember, the baby dragon's eyes never left her face. He drank eagerly, making small, contented sounds between swallows. When a drop of nutrition escaped and ran down his chin, Nora wiped it away gently with the soft cloth she always kept handy. "You're very good with him," the dragon observed, his amber eyes tracking her every movement. "He's easy to love," Nora replied honestly. "Aren't you, little star?" Ember chirped and pressed his snout against her palm, a gesture of trust that made her heart skip a beat. "I'm Davin," the dragon said suddenly. "Davin Stormshadow." Nora's eyes widened slightly. Stormshadow was a name she recognized. Old dragon. Nobility, one of the founding families of the dragon hegemony. "I'm Nora Ashworth. Thank you, Nora Ashworth, for your kindness." "Everyone deserves kindness," she said simply, adjusting Ember in her arms as he began to drowse. "Especially little ones who didn't ask for any of this." Davin's expression grew pained. "The physicians say his wing will never heal properly. The paralysis in his legs. They're not optimistic about improvement." "Physicians don't know everything," Nora said firmly. "I've seen miracles happen when people refuse to give up hope." "And if there are no miracles?" Nora looked down at Ember, now sleeping peacefully in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with perfect trust. then we love him anyway. We love him exactly as he is, and we make sure he knows he's perfect, just the way he is. Something shifted in Davin's face, a walls crumbling that he'd built around his heart. You speak as if you've done this before. Every child deserves to know they're loved unconditionally. Dragon or human, healthy or not, love isn't conditional on perfection. Outside, the ion storm raged against Concordia's shields, but inside, the little diner, 3 souls found an unexpected moment of peace. Ember slept in Nora's arms, while Davin watched them both with something like awe in his golden eyes. When the storm finally passed and other customers began trickling back in, Davin reluctantly prepared to leave. As Nora carefully transferred Ember back to his father's arms, the baby dragon made a soft sound of protest. I think he's going to miss you, Davin said softly. I'm here every night, Nora replied. Midnight shift, 5 days a week. Perhaps we'll see you again. As they reached the door, Davin turned back. Nora, thank you for seeing him. Really seeing him. After they left, Nora stood at the viewport watching their transport disappear into the star field. Her heart felt strangely full, as if something important had just begun. Henrik emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. That was Prince Davin Stormshadow, he said quietly. Royal family. His boy's condition has been all over the news nets. He's just a father who loves his son, Nora replied. And that little dragon is going to do amazing things someday. You sound pretty sure about that. Nora smiled, already hoping they'd return tomorrow. Some things you just know in your heart, Henrik. Some things you just know. 3 days passed before Nora saw them again. She'd found herself glancing toward the diner's entrance during every lull in service, telling herself it was silly to expect them to return. Dragons of royal blood didn't make habits of frequenting late-night diners on remote space stations. But when the atmospheric doors slid open at exactly 11:47 p.m., her heart gave a little leap of joy. Davin looked better than he had during the storm, more rested, his glamour steady and strong. Ember was awake this time, his dark blue eyes bright with curiosity as he took in the familiar surroundings. The baby dragon made excited chirping sounds when he spotted Nora across the room. Well, look who's back, she said warmly, approaching, with the cushions already in hand. How's my favorite little dragon tonight? Ember's response was an enthusiastic squeak that made several other patrons turn and smile. Even the gruffest asteroid miners had soft spots for baby dragons. He's been asking for you, Davin said as they settled into booth 7. Well, not asking exactly, but every time we pass a diner window, he gets excited. Nora arranged Ember's supports with practiced efficiency, noting that the baby dragon seemed more alert tonight, more responsive to his surroundings. Have you been getting better sleep, little star? Actually, yes, Davin admitted, settling across from them. Your feeding technique worked better than anything the specialist suggested. He's been eating regularly for the first time in weeks. Pride warmed Nora's chest as she gently stroked Ember's scales. The baby dragon leaned into her touch, purring a sound like distant thunder on a summer evening. The usual for both of you? She asked. Please. And Nora ... thank you for remembering. As she headed to the kitchen, Nora didn't notice the figure in the corner booth, watching their interaction with calculating eyes. Chancellor Voss had been tracking Prince Davin's movements for weeks, documenting his unsuitable associations. For the Hegemony Council. Henrik was already preparing Ember's bottle when she entered the kitchen. Royal baby's back, I see. His name is Ember, Nora said, checking the temperature of the nutrition blend. And he's not just a royal anything. He's a little person trying to figure out the world. Careful, Nora, Henrik warned gently. Dragons aren't like us. Their politics, their social rules, they're complicated. Dangerous sometimes. Every species has politics. Doesn't mean we stop treating each other with basic decency. When she returned with their meals, she found Davin looking troubled. His amber eyes kept darting toward the corner booth, where Chancellor Voss sat pretending to read data reports. "Everything all right?" Nora asked, settling in to feed Ember. "Fine," Davin said quickly, but his tension was obvious. "Just work concerns." Ember seemed to pick up on his father's mood, fussing slightly as Nora offered him the bottle. She adjusted, her hold humming that same Earth lullaby from their first meeting. The baby dragon relaxed immediately, his eyes fixed trustingly on her face. "You have a gift with him?" Davin observed, some of the stress leaving his voice. "The royal physicians are amazed by his progress. They want to know what we're doing differently." "We're not treating him like he's broken," Nora said simply. "We're just loving him and letting him be who he is. The council doesn't see it that way. They view his condition as a weakness in the bloodline." Anger flashed through Nora's chest. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, is it?" Davin's voice was bitter. "A dragon prince who may never fly, never transform, never lead armies into battle. By traditional standards are garbage," Nora interrupted, her voice sharp enough that Ember looked up at her in surprise. She immediately gentled her tone. "Sorry, little star. Mama's just frustrated with stupid grown-ups." Davin's eyes widened at her casual use of mama, but he didn't correct her. If anything, something warm and complicated flickered across his features. "You really believe that?" he said wonderingly. "You're not just being kind. Kindness is important, but this is truth. Ember is going to change the world someday. Mark my words. Maybe not in the way the council expects, but in ways that matter more." As if understanding her words, Ember gurgled happily and reached up to pat her cheek with one tiny claw. The gesture was so trusting, so full of affection, that Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "How do you know?" Davin asked quietly. "How can you be so certain?" "Look at him," Nora said, adjusting Ember so Davin could see his son's alert, intelligent expression. "Really look. He's not just surviving, he's thriving. He's curious about everything, responds to affection, shows empathy when others are upset. Those aren't the qualities of someone weak or broken. Those are the qualities of someone who's going to make the universe a better place." Davin reached across the table, his fingers brushing against Nora's hand. A touch sent electricity shooting up her arm, and from the way his eyes darkened, she knew he felt it too. "I wish my mother could see him the way you do," he said softly. "Maybe she will, given time. Queen Regent Serafina doesn't change her mind easily. She's already talking about succession planning, about the need for alternative arrangements." The pain in his voice made Nora's heart ache. "You're his father. That has to count for something. In dragon society, fitness to rule is everything. A weak heir reflects poorly on the entire bloodline." "Then dragon society needs to evolve," Nora said firmly. "Because if they can't see the value in this perfect little soul, they're the ones with the problem." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Chancellor Voss, his official robes rustling as he crossed the diner. Other patrons fell silent, recognizing the symbols of hegemony authority. "Your Highness," Voss said formally, his cold eyes taking in the scene. "How unexpected to find you here again." Davin straightened in his seat, instantly transforming. From concerned father to royal prince. "Chancellor, I wasn't aware you frequented this establishment. I don't." Voss's gaze moved to Nora, then to Ember nestled trustingly in her arms. "I was, however, curious about reports of your recent associations." The word associations dripped with disdain, and Nora felt Ember tense against her. Baby dragons were remarkably sensitive to emotional atmospheres. "I'm simply ensuring my son receives proper nutrition," Davin said coolly. Indeed, and this human is qualified to provide such care? This human has a name, Nora said before she could stop herself. And yes, I'm qualified to feed a baby and show him basic kindness. Voss's eyebrows rose at her temerity. Kindness. How quaint. Your Highness, surely you understand how this appears. The heir to the dragon throne being cared for by a service worker? Be very careful, Chancellor. Davin's voice carried a warning that made the temperature in. The diner seemed to drop several degrees. You're speaking about someone under my protection. The two dragons stared at each other for a long moment, power crackling invisibly between them. Finally, Voss inclined his head slightly. Of course, Your Highness. I simply want to ensure that all decisions are made with the Crown's best interests in mind. The Council will be most interested to hear about your son's progress. After Voss left, the diner remained quiet for several minutes. Ember had begun fussing during the confrontation, and Nora rocked him gently while murmuring soothing nonsense. I'm sorry, Davin said eventually. You shouldn't have to deal with that kind of prejudice. I've dealt with worse, Nora said honestly, but I'm worried about you, about both of you. The Chancellor isn't wrong about appearances. A human caring for the dragon heir. It's unprecedented. Maybe it's time for some precedents to be broken. Davin studied her face intently. You don't understand what you're suggesting. The political implications. I understand that Ember needs people who love him unconditionally, Nora interrupted. Everything else is just noise. Is that what this is? Love? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to examine. Nora looked down at Ember, now sleeping peacefully in her arms, and knew her. Answer was written all over her face. Yes, she said simply. It is. When her shift ended an hour later, Davin walked her to the transport bay. Ember was awake again, making soft, contented sounds as he rode in his father's arms. Nora, Davin said as they reached her shuttle. What Chancellor Voss said tonight, he wasn't entirely wrong. Being associated with me, with us, could make your life complicated. My life's already complicated, she replied. My sister Mara's been sending messages from Earth, worried about me living out here alone. My savings account is perpetually empty, and I dream about finishing nursing school someday. But you know what's not complicated? What? The way I feel when I see you two walk through that door. The way Ember lights up when he sees me. The way you smile when he's happy. She reached up to touch Ember's tiny snout, smiling when he chirped at her. Those things are simple and true and good. Davin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Would you consider having dinner with us sometime? Not at the diner. Somewhere we could talk without interruption. Nora's heart began racing. Like a date? Like getting to know each other better. For Ember's sake, of course. Of course, she agreed, fighting back a smile. For Ember's sake. As her transport pulled away from the docking bay, Nora saw Davin still standing there. Ember cradled against his chest. Through the window, she watched the baby dragon's head turn to track her departure, and her heart clenched with an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. Back at her small apartment, Nora found a message waiting from her sister Mira on Earth. As she activated the holodisplay, her sister's familiar face appeared, wearing an expression of concern. Nora, I've been seeing some strange reports in the news feeds about dragon royalty. On Concordia. Please tell me you're not getting mixed up in interspecies politics. You know how dangerous that can be for humans. Nora stared at the message for a long time before composing her reply. Don't worry, Myra. I'm just doing what I've always done, taking care of someone who needs it. Some things are more important than politics. As she sent the message, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. But as she drifted off to sleep, All she could think about was Ember's trusting eyes and the way Davin's hand had felt when it touched hers. Some risks, she decided, were worth taking. The emergency alert came at 3 a.m., piercing through Nora's sleep like a shard of ice. Her personal communicator blazed with an urgent message from an encrypted frequency, the one Davin had given her weeks ago. Medical emergency. Ember critical. Please come. Nora was dressed and running toward the transport bay before she was fully awake. The coordinates led her deep into the Dragon Quarter of Concordia, where the artificial gravity ran heavier and the architecture soared. In impossible spirals of crystalline metal, the Storm Shadow residence was a marvel of engineering, a towering spire that seemed to grow from the station's superstructure like a living thing. But Nora barely noticed the grandeur as security scanners verified her identity and swept her through multiple checkpoints. She found them in the medical suite on the 15th floor. Ember lay motionless in a diagnostic cradle, his tiny chest barely rising and falling. Sensor arrays surrounded him like metallic flowers, their displays painting his vital signs in stark red warnings. Davin stood beside the cradle in his true dragon form, a magnificent creature of deep bronze and gold that filled half the spacious room. His great head was lowered protectively over his son, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled from everywhere at once. The physicians say his nervous system is shutting down. A delayed reaction to the birth trauma, they claim. They want to put him in stasis until they can find a treatment. Stasis could kill him, Nora said, moving immediately to Ember's side. Babies need stimulation, interaction. His brain is still developing. That's what I told them. But they insist it's the only way to preserve what function he has left. Nora studied the readouts with growing alarm. Ember's neural activity was indeed declining, but something about the pattern struck her as wrong. Davin, when did this start? 3 days ago. He stopped eating, became lethargic. By yesterday, he could barely lift his head. 3 days ago, Nora repeated thoughtfully. Right after Chancellor Voss visited the diner. The great dragon's eyes fixed on her with sudden intensity. You think this is connected? I think stress affects babies more than adults realize. Dragons are empathic, right? Even the little ones? Especially the little ones. Their mental shields haven't developed yet. So, for weeks, Ember's been absorbing not just your emotions, but everyone's around him. The physicians who see him as a medical problem, the council members who view him as a political liability, Chancellor Voss, who thinks he's a weakness to be hidden away. Davin's massive form shuddered. He's been drowning in their disapproval. But thriving on ours, Nora added gently. Look at his neural patterns when I'm here versus when I'm not. The difference is subtle, but it's there. She was right. The monitor showed measurable improvements in Ember's brain activity whenever Nora was present. Increased theta waves associated with healing and growth in infant dragons. What are you suggesting? That maybe what Ember needs isn't more medical intervention. Maybe he needs less stress and more love. Without waiting for permission, Nora carefully lifted Ember from his cradle. The baby dragon was frighteningly limp, his usual bright alertness dimmed to almost nothing. But as she settled him against her chest and began humming their lullaby, his breathing steadied slightly. The physicians will be furious. Let them be furious. Right now, the only opinion that matters is Ember's. 4. The next 6 hours, Nora held vigil. She sang every earth lullaby she knew, told stories in a soft voice, and simply let Ember feel her presence. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, his condition began to stabilize. When Queen Regent Serafina arrived at dawn, she found a human woman asleep in a chair with the dragon heir cradled in her arms, both breathing peacefully. The Queen Regent was smaller than her son, but no less imposing. In her humanoid form, she appeared to be a woman in her prime with silver-streaked auburn hair and eyes like molten copper. She wore authority like armor, and her gaze could have cut through starship hull plating. "So," she said quietly, causing Nora to stir, "you're the human who's been caring for my grandson." Nora came fully awake instantly, clutching Ember protectively. The baby dragon sensed the change and made a small whimpering sound. "Your Majesty," Nora said, inclining her head as much as she could while holding Ember. "I've been hearing remarkable reports about Ember's progress. The royal physicians are calling it unprecedented. He's a remarkable little dragon." Seraphina studied them both with calculating eyes. "Indeed. Tell me, Miss Ashworth, what do you see when you look at my grandson?" It was clearly a test. Nora considered her words carefully. "I see a baby who's curious about everything, who responds to kindness with trust, who makes everyone around him smile. I see intelligence and empathy and a strength that has nothing to do with his physical limitations. And when you look at his condition, his disabilities, I see challenges he'll learn to work around or overcome. I don't see limitations on what he can become." The Queen Regent was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The physicians tell me he nearly died last night, that you may have saved his life simply by being here. I just held him. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. My son has requested a private audience with us both. Ember is stable. Now, will you come?" They moved to a comfortable sitting room, where Davin waited in his humanoid form. He looked exhausted, but relieved as Nora transferred Ember to his arms. The baby dragon immediately perked up at his father's familiar scent. "Mother," Davin began formally, "I have a proposition to make." "I'm listening." "I want to offer Miss Ashworth a position as Ember's primary caregiver. Full-time, residential, with complete authority over his medical and developmental care." Seraphine's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting we place the heir to the dragon throne in the care of a human waitress?" "I'm suggesting we place my son in the care of someone who sees his potential instead of his problems," Davin replied firmly. "The political implications can go to the seven hells," Davin interrupted, his composure cracking. "Mother, he was dying, literally dying, because he couldn't cope with the negativity surrounding him. In 6 hours with Nora, he's shown more improvement than in weeks with the royal medical staff." Nora looked between them, her heart racing. "Your Majesty, with respect, I'm not qualified for something like that. I never finished nursing school. I don't know dragon physiology." "But you know my grandson," Seraphina said softly. "You know him in a way no one else does." She paused, studying Ember's peaceful expression as he dozed in his father's arms. "Very well. I have a counterproposal." Both Davin and Nora waited tensely. "Miss Ashworth, I will fund your return to nursing school specialized training in interspecies pediatric care. You'll study under the finest medical minds in the galaxy. In return, you'll serve as Ember's caregiver during your training and for 5 years afterward." "Mother," Davin began. "I'm not finished." Seraphine's gaze moved between them, and Nora suddenly realized the Queen had seen something they thought they'd hidden. "There will be conditions. Miss Ashworth will live here, in the royal residence. She'll have full medical authority over Ember's care, but will report regularly to me on his progress. And she'll receive training in dragon culture, politics, and protocol." "Why?" Nora asked suspiciously. "Why would you invest so much in a human?" "Because," Seraphina said with a slight smile, "I've lived long enough to recognize when the universe is trying to tell me something. My grandson responds to you in ways that defy medical explanation. My son looks at you like—" She paused meaningfully. "Well, like a dragon who's found his mate." The words hung in the air like a gravitational field, pulling everything into their orbit. Davin's face flushed bronze, and Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Your Majesty, I don't think," Nora began. "Think carefully before you refuse," Seraphina interrupted. This isn't just about Ember's care, though that remains paramount. This is about the future of two species learning to coexist. You've already proven that love transcends biological differences. The question is whether you're brave enough to let the entire galaxy see it. Nora looked at Ember, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms. Then she looked at Davin, seeing hope and fear warring in his amber eyes. What about your council? Chancellor. Voss seemed pretty clear about his opinions on human involvement in dragon affairs. The council answers to me, Seraphina said crisply, and I answer to the needs of my people. If loving a human makes my grandson thrive, then perhaps it's time our people learn new definitions of strength. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. I need to contact my sister. She's been worried about me getting involved in dragon politics. Invite her for a visit, Davin said quietly. Let her see that you're safe, that you're happy. And if I accept, what happens then? Then you become part of our family, Seraphina said simply, with all the privileges and dangers that entails. Later that evening, after the Queen Regent had left and Ember was settled in his specially designed nursery, Nora found herself alone with Davin on the residence's observation deck. The stars of the Andromeda Drift spread before them like scattered diamonds. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Your mother made it sound like more than just a job offer. Davin was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, Nora, when I hold Ember and watch him respond to you, when I see the joy you bring to his life, I find myself wishing for impossible things. Like what? Like a future where species doesn't matter, where love is enough to overcome politics and tradition and the fears of small minds. Nora turned to face him fully. And if love isn't enough, then we'll make it enough. His hand found hers in the starlight. Together, as if summoned by their words, Ember's sleepy voice drifted from the baby monitor. Mama, Nora? Papa, where you? They looked at each other and smiled. Coming, little star, Nora called softly, and as they walked hand in hand toward the nursery, toward a future neither had planned, but both were ready to embrace, the stars seemed to pulse with approval. Some love stories were written in the heavens long before the lovers found each other. This one had been waiting in the space between worlds, in the quiet moments when a dragon prince learned that strength came in many forms, and a human woman discovered that home wasn't a place. It was the sound of little dragon wings and their horns. Warmth of amber eyes and starlight. The proposition had been made and accepted. Now came the beautiful, terrifying work of building something that had never existed before. A family that transcended species, bound together not by biology, but by choice, by love, and by the unwavering belief that some bonds are stronger than any force in the universe.